It was on a cloudy Tuesday morning that Nora first saw him, the man who would unknowingly alter the course of her entire life. She had just finished her 700 a.m. lecture, tired, hungry, with only a few coins left in her pocket. The university gates buzzed with students laughing, running to catch their next class, or heading toward the canteen with fuller wallets. But Nora walked slowly, the weight of her poverty pressing down on her shoulders. Her stomach growled as she reached the kiosk and bought the only thing she could afford, a loaf of bread and one sachet of water, just enough to make it through the day. Then she saw him, sitting on a tattered mat beside the busy roadside. His clothes were dusty, hanging off his thin frame like forgotten fabric on a hanger. His eyes were hidden behind dark glasses, but his presence couldn't be missed. A small sign lay beside a rusted tin bowl. "I am blind. Please help me." Most people passed him like he didn't exist. Some even stepped over his foot. A few students laughed, mocking the way he sat quietly unmoving, like a statue of shame. Nora stared for a moment. Torn. She was starving. This was her only food. Yet something about the man, something silent, broken, but dignified, made her hesitate. Then she did the unthinkable. She walked to him, knelt down, and tore the bread in half. "Here," she said softly, "you can have this." He lifted his head slowly. His face remained still, unreadable. His voice, however, was deep and calm. "What is your name?" "Nora." He nodded, not smiling, just acknowledging her. "Thank you, Nora." That was it. But something shifted inside her, a quiet ripple. She couldn't explain why, but she kept thinking about him all day. The next evening after class, while others rushed to their hostels, Nora found herself walking down a different street. A dusty path past a shuttered kiosk under a large mango tree. There, on a cracked wooden bench, he sat, cane resting by his side, that same tin bowl in front of him. "Is that you, Nora?" he asked softly, his voice recognizing her steps. "It's me," she replied, smiling, pulling out the food she had saved. They shared it, quietly. She never told him it was her only meal. They talked about the sun, the roasted corn in the air, her mother's old stew recipe, his dreams. Oh, he had dreams. Dreams of stars, of music, of flying across Africa. Kofi, that was his name. He wasn't talkative, but when he spoke, it felt like poetry disguised as conversation. And she kept coming back. Every day, every single day. And something in her began to heal, a part of her that had long been hollow. Until one afternoon, their quiet world was shattered. A group of students walked down the street dressed in the latest designer clothes, gold chains, flashy shoes, laughter like thunder. At the front was Mom, loud, rich, proud. "Ah, look who we have here," he sneered. "Isn't that the scholarship girl again, sitting with a beggar?" Laughter exploded around him. One boy chewing gum tossed his bottle of water right at Kofi. It landed on his lap. "Hey!" Nora jumped to her feet. "What's wrong with you?" Mame smirked, stepping closer. "Why waste time with a blind beggar, Nora? You're already poor. Want to marry poverty too?" They all laughed. One of the girls pulled out her phone. "Smile, beggar boy. This will trend." Kofi didn't react, but his hands, they shook slightly. The bottle rolled off his lap. Nora's voice was trembling. "You think you're better because of your watches, your clothes, you have everything, but your hearts are empty." Mame scoffed. "Come join us. I can buy you lunch. A real life." Her voice cracked. I'd rather starve every day than walk beside people like you." They walked away, laughing, their noise fading into the street's dust. Nora turned to Kofi. He was too quiet, his hands still clenched. She knelt beside him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have stopped them." He shook his head slowly. "You don't need to say sorry for their wickedness. I'm used to it." She reached for his hand. "No, you shouldn't be used to pain. You deserve kindness too." That night she walked home with no dinner, an empty stomach, and a heart full of rage. She stared at her mattress on the floor, unable to sleep, only thinking of him, of his quiet pain, of her own helplessness. But she returned again the next day, and the next. Until one rainy afternoon, she arrived with trembling lips. "My scholarship," she said barely above a whisper. "They've cut it." Kofi listened in silence. "There's no funding this year. I don't know how I'll pay my fees or eat." She didn't cry. She just sat there exhausted from pretending to be strong. Kofi fumbled until he found her hand. "I may be blind," he said softly, "but I see you, Nora. You are gold." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her. Not her professors, not her father, not anyone. Just this blind man with nothing but his cane and bowl, who somehow saw the truth of her more clearly than anyone ever had. She wiped her face. "I'll look for a job. I'll manage." Kofi said nothing. But that night he made a vow. If she hadn't given up on him, he would never give up on her. But across town, in a mansion lined with glass and secrets, a man named Uncle Mensa held a photo in his hand. The photo of Kofi sitting on a mat. The scar on the boy's chin was unmistakable. "He's alive," he whispered. "The boy I tried to erase." A storm was coming. Nora's days became a cycle of borrowed hours and stolen minutes. She cleaned houses in the early mornings, attended lectures with an empty stomach, then walked the long, dusty path just to sit beside Kofi. She no longer cared about how people stared. She didn't mind the whispers behind her back. To her, the world shrank to the small wooden bench beneath the mango tree, and the man who waited there every evening as if she were the only thing that made time matter. But one evening, as she approached their usual spot, a black car parked near the corner caught her attention. It was too polished for their part of town, too quiet to be safe. She slowed her steps, but Kofi's familiar voice called out gently, "Is that you, Nora?" And just like that, her fears faded again. That was Kofi's gift, a voice that calmed storms even when it was trembling inside. They sat together like always, but something about that evening felt strange. A chill lingered in the air, even though the sun was still high. Nora handed him a warm wrap of boiled plantains, the last of her food from the day's work. He touched it slowly. "You haven't eaten again, have you?" She forced a laugh. "Of course I have." But she hadn't. He nodded, not pressing further. Yet his grip on the food tightened. That night, as Nora lay beneath the broken umbrella beside Kofi sharing the mat he called home, she dreamed of quiet things. Of silence that didn't feel like loneliness, of warmth that didn't come from sunlight, but from being seen. The next morning, on her way to class, someone stopped her. A stranger, too handsome, too confident, and too clean to belong here. "Hi, are you Nora?" She blinked, unsure whether to answer. "I'm David. I've seen you around." She nodded slowly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he added. "Just wanted to say, you carry yourself differently, with strength." Nora offered a small, tired smile, then walked past him. She had no time for flattery. But David wasn't done. He reappeared the next day, this time with lunch. The day after that, he carried her books. Soon his face became familiar on campus. He didn't push. He simply hovered. Kind words. Well-timed compliments. Polished charm. And before long, the whispers started again. She's with that rich new student now. Guess she dumped the blind beggar. Smart girl. Nora ignored them. But something inside her began to tangle. Why now? Why him then? One afternoon, David walked her to the university gate and said, "I heard what happened to your friend." Nora stiffened. "He has a name," she said coldly. "Kofi." "Of course," David replied, raising his hands. "Sorry, I meant no offense." They walked in silence until he said quietly, "You know you're beautiful, Nora. You deserve someone who can give you a future." She stopped walking. "I didn't ask for a future," she replied. "I asked for love." David smiled, but his eyes were calculating. "Wouldn't it be better to have both?" She turned away. Better isn't always right. That evening, Uncle Mensa leaned back in his leather chair, sipping brandy, as the spy he had planted, David, updated him on every interaction. "She's stronger than I thought," Mensa muttered. "But we'll break her eventually." He opened a folder filled with photographs, Nora walking to school, Nora sleeping beside Kofi, Nora crying behind a clinic. "Pressure," he said coldly. "Let's increase it." 2 days later, a stranger approached Nora at the clinic with a sealed envelope. No sender. Just a note inside, "Leave him now, or suffer for loving a lie." That same night, an unknown number called her. She picked up. A voice cold and low asked, "Do you love him enough to die for him?" Then silence. Nora didn't tell Kofi. She couldn't. He was still recovering, barely able to stand without help. But her hands trembled as she fed him, her eyes scanned every shadow. The clinic had become a cage of fear. Yet even then, she stayed. "Are you okay?" Kofi asked gently. "You've been quiet." She nodded quickly. "Just tired." He tilted his head as if trying to hear the truth in her silence. But he said nothing. The next morning, the door to the clinic creaked open, and a man entered uninvited. Tall, commanding, and dressed in a dark green agbada that seemed to drink the light around him. "Well, well," he said smoothly. "How's the little love story going?" Kofi froze. His body tensed before the voice even finished. "Uncle Mensa!" Nora looked between them, confused. "You poor girl," Mensa sneered, turning to her. "You don't even know who you've been sacrificing your life for." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "That blind beggar," he said with a laugh, "is no beggar. He's not even blind." The air disappeared from the room. Nora's heart pounded. She turned to Kofi. "Is that true?" His face was pale, pained. "Nora, please, I was going to tell you." "So it's true," her voice cracked. "You let me believe you were blind. You let me give up everything for you." Tears streamed down her face. "I begged my father. I starved myself. And all this time you were—" "What rich pretending?" Kofi stepped forward weakly. "I didn't lie to hurt you. I was hiding. My uncle—" "Don't," she whispered, shaking her head. "Don't make excuses. You watched me suffer." Uncle Mensa stood at the door, victorious. "Now you know. He used you, just like he used everyone." Nora ran, out of the clinic, into the street. Her sobs were sharp, her breath shallow. She didn't stop until she collapsed in front of her sister's house. Miriam opened the door and gasped. "Nora, What happened? Nora couldn't speak. She just cried. Miriam pulled her close. Talk to me. He lied to me. Nora choked. Kofi lied. Why? He pretended to be blind, to be poor. He let me suffer. Miriam was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, Did he ever treat you badly? No. Did he ever make you feel worthless? Never. Then maybe, just maybe, he had his reasons. Nora lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling. Her heart broke again and again. Yet beneath the anger, beneath the pain, was something else. The memory of his voice when he said, I see you, Nora. The way he smiled when he heard her footsteps. The silence they shared. The nights they survived. Could all of that have been a lie? Or was it the only truth he had? The next morning, she found him waiting by the bench. He looked thinner, weaker. His cane rested beside him, like a relic of the lie he once lived. When she approached, he didn't stand. He simply said, Thank you for coming. They sat in silence for a while. Then he began. I didn't choose to lie. I chose to disappear. My uncle took everything. My father's company, my name, my life. He tried to kill me. I faked my death, disguised myself, hid behind blindness because no one looks twice at a beggar. I was safe in the shadows. Until you. Nora didn't interrupt. Her hands trembled in her lap. You made me want to be seen again. But I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew who I was, you'd leave. He looked at her, then eyes wide and raw. You were the only truth I had. She wiped her tears, unsure what to believe, unsure what to feel. You broke my heart, she whispered. But I know pain too. I know what it means to run. Slowly, she reached for his hand. I still feel betrayed, but I see you. Not the lie, not the name. You. Kofi broke. His body shook as he cried the first time in years. I love you, Nora, he said, voice breaking. I always have. She pulled him into her arms. Then don't ever lie to me again. I won't. Good. Because I would have stayed. Even if you were blind forever. He nodded. I know. And just like that, two broken hearts began to heal. Not because the wounds were gone, but because they were ready to carry them together. But far away in a dark office, Uncle Mensa stared at his screen with cold fury. So the girl stayed, he muttered. Fine. The soft tricks are over. He lit a cigar, eyes glowing with menace. Now we test her pain threshold. Nora hadn't slept in 2 nights. Even when her body gave in, her mind refused rest. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every step behind her sounded like a threat. The note was still in her bag, its words echoing like a curse. Leave him now or suffer for loving a lie. But she didn't tell Kofi. He had already lost enough. She wouldn't let him carry her fears too. Still, even as he regained strength walking short distances within the clinic, his hands trembled more than usual. The silence between them grew heavier, not with anger, but with the weight of danger neither dared name. Outside, the world whispered. Inside, they clung to quiet moments, as if time itself might betray them. One afternoon, Kofi sat by the clinic window, breathing in the soft breeze while Nora went to fetch water from the nearby borehole. The alley was quiet, too quiet. 3 men waited in the shadows. Hey, blind boy, one of them called out, mocking. Kofi turned his head toward the voice, instinctively clutching the wall. Can I help you? The first punch struck his stomach. He gasped, doubling over. Another kick followed, then another. His ribs burned and his breath caught. Still, he didn't scream. "Stay away from her," one of them spat. "She doesn't belong to trash like you." Kofi collapsed his cane, falling beside him, helpless against fists of hatred. And then they vanished. When Nora returned, the water bowl slipped from her hands the moment she saw him. Blood soaked his shirt. His mouth was split, one eye swollen shut. "Kofi!" she screamed, her voice slicing the air. The entire neighborhood heard her cry. She dropped to her knees, cradling his broken body, sobbing. "Who did this? Who?" Kofi didn't answer. He simply shook his head. "It's nothing," he whispered, lips trembling. "Nothing," she cried. "Look at you." But he turned his face away. "I'm sorry." That night, Nora couldn't sleep. She sat beside him, fingers tracing the bruises on his face, whispering, "What kind of world is this, Kofi? Why is loving you so dangerous?" But he had no answer, only silence. The next day, she received another message. This time, not a note, but a photo of herself walking alone, taken from behind. The caption read, "Still loyal or ready to break." Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Kofi noticed her fear, but said nothing. He didn't have to. He knew it had begun. Meanwhile, across campus, David still played his part. The charming, caring friend who always appeared at just the right moment. When Nora returned to school, students whispered louder than ever, "She's still dating that blind beggar. Doesn't she know she could do better?" Even some lecturers commented, but David never stopped. "Nora, you're too beautiful to waste yourself," he said one evening, walking beside her. "Let someone care for you, give you more." "I didn't ask for more," she snapped. "I asked for real." "Kofi is holding you back," he replied carefully. "What kind of future can he give you?" "A future where I'm not bought," she replied. "A future where I'm seen, not sold." David sighed. "You deserve better." "Then why do you sound just like the people who kicked him?" she asked coldly, walking away. Later that night, David made the call. "She's not falling for it," he muttered. Uncle Mensa's voice crackled through the line. "Then we try something else. That girl must leave him, or I'll ruin them both." Nora knew she was being watched. She felt it in her bones. She started carrying pepper spray, avoided alleys, and told Kofi to always stay inside. But danger didn't always come with fists. One evening, while cleaning her clothes at the back of the clinic, she found a second letter slipped under the door. This one was worse. It read, "You think love saves, watch what it costs." And that's when Uncle Mensa stepped into the light. One warm afternoon, dressed in a sharp agbada, a cruel smile stretched across his face, he entered the clinic without knocking. "I must say," he said to Nora, "you're loyal, admirably so. But do you even know what he's capable of?" Kofi tried to rise from the bed, but his wounds still stung. "Uncle Mensa, stop." "No, let her hear," Mensa replied, eyes locked on Nora. "You sacrificed your dreams for him. But what if he isn't just a liar? What if he's dangerous?" Nora stepped forward. "He's the only one who's never hurt me." Mensa scoffed. "Yet people get hurt around him. Isn't that interesting?" That night she sat in the dark, heart heavy with confusion. She loved Kofi. That much she knew. But how do you love when fear chases your every step? How do you hold someone when the world wants to break your grip? The answer came the next morning. Nora had gone to buy food across the street. It was supposed to be quick. The sun was high. The street was crowded. She didn't see the black car that pulled up behind her. Two men stepped out flashing fake ID cards. "Excuse us, miss," one said. "Are you Nora?" Yes. Why? We need to ask you some questions. Before she could answer, one grabbed her wrist. Let me go, she screamed. Help! People turned unsure what to believe. But then someone shouted, They're not real police. Chaos erupted. Phones came out. Videos were taken. Kofi, hearing the scream, rushed out of the clinic despite his wounds. He ran faster than he ever had. Nora! He shouted. He crashed into the alley just in time to see her struggling. Let her go! The crowd gathered. Someone threw a bottle. Another shouted. The men fled. One was caught, the other vanished. Nora collapsed in Kofi's arms, shaking uncontrollably. I'm here, he whispered, holding her close. I'm here now. That night the police came. Your uncle has been arrested, Detective Manima said. Kidnapping attempt, fraud, blackmail. The file you submitted was enough. Kofi nodded, holding Nora tighter. Thank you. But even as justice began to rise, Nora's wounds remained. She didn't speak for hours, just stared. Her fingers curled into Kofi's shirt, as if he were the only real thing left in a crumbling world. Days passed. Nora sat by the window, tracing invisible lines on the glass. Kofi watched her in silence, guilt gnawing at him. She had given up everything. Her scholarship, her safety, her dignity, for a man who once wore a mask of blindness. One morning he stood behind her, fully dressed, in a tailored suit. I want to show you something, he said. She turned eyes wide. Where? Come with me. They drove for hours past the city gates into a world she had never imagined. The mansion stood like a dream. Fountains, flowering trees, marble floors. Where are we? She asked. Home, he whispered, and I want it to be yours too. Inside, a woman appeared in gold and white, regal and calm. Mama, Kofi said softly. Meet Nora, the woman who saved me. His mother embraced her without hesitation. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for loving my son when the world turned away. And for the first time, Nora cried. Not out of fear, not from pain, but from relief, from being seen, from being safe. But even as warmth returned, she knew this was not the end. Love had brought them here. Through hunger lies violence and betrayal. But ahead still lay the question, now that the masks had fallen. Could their love stand unhidden under the light? The day after Nora met Kofi's mother, something inside her shifted. It wasn't just the grandeur of the mansion or the gleam of marble floors beneath her tired feet. It was the way Kofi held her hand, as if he'd never let go again. The way his mother looked at her, not as a charity case, but as family. For the first time in what felt like years, Nora's shoulders dropped. Her breath came easier. Her scars didn't vanish, but they no longer burned. They simply existed alongside her strength. The next morning, Kofi took her home. Not to the broken clinic, not to the alley under the mango tree, but to her father's house. In a clean, perfectly pressed navy blue suit, he stepped out of a luxury car, walked to the gate, and knocked. Her father opened it. His eyes widened in disbelief. Nora, he whispered. She stepped forward, face calm, posture proud. Daddy. But what shocked him more was the man beside her. Kofi Osu. Clean cut. Upright. No longer the blind beggar his daughter had once defended in tears. I heard everything, her father murmured, stepping aside. I was wrong, Nora. I didn't protect you. I didn't believe in you. Nora's lips trembled. Can you ever forgive me? Tears spilled down her face before she could even nod. She walked into his arms and held him tight. "I already have." Miriam came out running, and for the first time the three of them embraced, not as broken parts of a fractured family, but as people choosing to begin again. Months passed. Nora returned to school, finished her final year, graduated with honors. Her classmates no longer whispered. They stared, in awe. The girl who had once scrubbed campus bathrooms to survive now walked across the graduation stage with poise hand in hand with the man they had once mocked her for loving. Meanwhile, Kofi reclaimed his name. Badu Holdings, once lost to corruption, was reborn with a new board, new mission, new leadership. The headlines read, "The Return of the Heir Who Walked Among Shadows." But in all the noise, all the celebration, Nora and Kofi remained the same. They still shared boiled plantains some nights, still walked through dusty markets together, still laughed under mango trees, because they knew now what many never would. Love didn't grow in wealth, it grew in war zones, and theirs had survived fire. Then one bright afternoon, beneath an arch of golden flowers in the Osu Estate Gardens, Kofi knelt down. No cameras, no audience, just a ring and a trembling voice. "I've loved you since the moment you handed me half your bread, Nora," he whispered. "Please say yes." She was already crying as she nodded. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding was held under the same tree where Nora once sat beside a blind stranger. The garden overflowed with friends, family, and strangers who had followed their story. Her father walked her down the aisle, redeemed. Miriam held her gown's train, radiant with pride. Kofi's mother wiped her tears every few minutes. But the vows, they were simple. No rehearsed speeches, no poetic theatrics. Just two people, eyes locked, voices trembling, promising, "I will not leave even when the world tells me to. I will love you when it's easy. I will love you when it isn't." They kissed under a shower of rose petals as the sun poured golden light over them. Later that evening, Nora stood by the window of their new home, the very room Kofi once called his mother's prayer room. It now held bookshelves, a guitar, and a small photo of the cracked bench they once shared. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly, her eyes still on the stars. The mat, the mango tree, the rain. Kofi came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I miss it only because it gave me you." Years passed. The pain faded, but the story remained. Sometimes they would visit the old neighborhood, sit beneath the mango tree, watch the children run past, and smile at the memories stitched into the dust. One evening, under that same tree, two toddlers, twins, ran barefoot through the grass. Nora sat on a mat again, not out of poverty, but nostalgia. Kofi sat beside her, fingers gently tracing the lines of her hand. Their son Essie tumbled into her lap. Their daughter Abba followed with a giggle. Nora kissed their foreheads and laughed, this time not through hunger or fear, but through overflowing joy. "I still remember the first time I saw you," Kofi said, his voice soft. "You looked at me like I was human. Not broken, not poor, just seen." Nora turned to him, her smile full. "That's because I didn't see what was missing in you. I saw what was overflowing." He leaned closer. "If I had to lose everything all over again just to find you, I would." Tears welled in her eyes. "Me too." And that was the end of the storm. No disguises, no secrets. Just love, quiet, unshakable, unbought. They had walked through fire, survived darkness, and now in the soft golden light of peace they lived, not as the girl who fed a beggar and the beggar who pretended to be blind, but as two souls who found home in each other. 5 years had passed since the wedding. 5 years since Nora and Kofi stood under the arch of golden flowers, promising to love each other through light and shadow. The city had changed, so had they. But the bench under the mango tree still stood, weathered, solid, a witness to everything. And every month without fail, they returned to it. They had everything now. Wealth, yes. Power, yes. But more than that, they had clarity. The kind that only came from hunger, from betrayal, from nights spent under torn umbrellas, praying for morning. And they had a vow: we will not waste what we suffered for. It began with a simple idea. One morning, Nora sat on their bedroom balcony watching the sun rise. Kofi stood behind her, their son, asleep in his arms. "Do you ever feel like we were given all this just to give it away?" she asked quietly. "Every single day," he said. That week, they launched the Osu Foundation, named after Kofi's late father. Its mission was clear: to find the ones forgotten, to feed the ones starving, to educate the ones abandoned. But unlike other charities, they didn't sit in air-conditioned offices signing checks. No, they went out, to the gutters, to the clinics, to the benches. Nora returned to her old university with a different identity now. Not the girl who borrowed uniforms and skipped lunch, but as the guest speaker of the New Beginnings Scholarship created for students who had lost their funding, just like she once had. "I'm not here because I was lucky," she told a hall full of students, her voice steady. "I'm here because I refused to let pain define me, and because someone believed in me when I had nothing." They built clinics in rural areas staffed with doctors who were paid well enough to stay. They funded schools where children were given meals with every lesson. They created housing for girls thrown out for being pregnant, for boys accused of stealing when all they did was starve. The empire Kofi once hid from became a fortress for the broken. But change doesn't come without resistance. Some called it showmanship. Others called it impossible. And many in the elite circles whispered, "Why does he spend on the poor? They'll never give anything back." But Kofi only smiled. "That's the point," he'd say. "We don't give to receive. We give because once someone gave us a moment of kindness, and it saved us." Uncle Mensa was still in prison. His trial had exposed a network of fraud stretching back a decade. His wealth was stripped, his allies vanished, and his name became synonymous with greed and downfall. Kofi never visited him. Nora never spoke his name. Their justice wasn't in vengeance, it was in legacy. Then one day, something unexpected happened. A young man named Tunde showed up at their foundation's gate. He was tall, lean, with eyes that had seen too much, and dreams he didn't dare speak aloud. "I want to help," he said. "I used to sleep under the bridge near Makola Market. Someone once gave me a meal and told me their story. It changed me. That someone was you." Kofi stared at him, speechless. "I didn't think anyone was listening that day," he said. Tunde smiled. "We were all listening, even the ones too hungry to look up." That's when the Osu Youth Program was born. A platform not just for charity, but for empowerment. Kofi taught business. Nora taught leadership. Miriam ran mentorship for girls. Former street children became public speakers. Former beggars became entrepreneurs. One of them, a girl named Ifua, who used to sell oranges at the traffic light, became the first female mayor of their region within 4 years. They were rewriting stories, from the bottom up. And still, every week, no matter how packed their schedules, Nora and Kofi found time to sit under that mango tree, with their children, sometimes with students, sometimes alone, but always remembering. One evening, as the sun began to dip and the breeze carried the scent of roasted corn, Nora turned to Kofi. Do you remember the first time you sat here? He smiled, his hair now slightly graying at the sides. Yes, I thought the world had ended. And now, she asked. He looked at her, then at the children playing in the grass. Now I know it was just beginning. Suddenly, a young girl approached them shyly, holding a torn notebook. Madam Nora, she said, eyes wide, can you teach me how to write like you? Nora smiled, pulling her close. Of course, sweetheart. What's your name? Blessing, she whispered. Kofi chuckled. Then let's begin your blessing, shall we? That night, after the kids were tucked in and the staff had gone to bed, Wara walked into their garden barefoot. Kofi followed her silently. She turned, arms outstretched. Look at us, she whispered. From rain-soaked mats to this. He stepped into her arms. But this, he said softly, placing her hand on his chest. This was always the home. The rest is just decoration. She smiled, head against his heart. Kofi, yes. If we ever lose everything again, would you still love me? He pulled her even closer. If all I had was the memory of your voice on that Tuesday morning when you first said my name, I'd still be the richest man alive. The stars above blinked like old friends. The world was quiet. The storms had passed. And yet the story never really ended. Because love like theirs never truly finishes. It echoes. In the voice of the next girl handing her last bread to someone forgotten. In the hand of the next boy refusing to mock what he doesn't understand. In the eyes of every soul that dares to believe even in darkness love still sees.